Good morning, all. And today's video is, I'm sure, not going to be positive or well received at all by those neurotypical groups, including politicians and government officials in the United States and in the state of Florida, although I do believe it will probably be well received by the community of autistic adults. And so we really need to talk about what's going on in the United States with autistic adults, and because nobody's talking about this. But I'm going to start with the fact that autism is a retrospective diagnosis. Now, what does that mean? If you query in the following search term to Google on your computer, quote, autism is a retrospective diagnosis, end quote, it will come back and give you an AI-generated response as the first item in the search results. That will say, yes, an autism diagnosis can often be considered retrospective because it frequently requires looking back at a person's developmental history and behaviors from childhood to determine if they meet the criteria for an autism spectrum disorder diagnosis. Even if the diagnosis is made later in life, meaning they are assessing past behaviors rather than current ones only. Now, having said that, and I'm autistic by diagnosis of the University of South Florida. That was my second autism diagnosis. So I didn't know about the first one when I grew up as a child because my parents hid it from me. And my mom only announced in about 1993, your father and I put that away. I'm so sorry. That and his court-ordered obligation to pay me adult child support. So, my second autism diagnosis was done, and I'll be posting a video on that, in 2009 when I was 53 years old. So, it's very widely known that there is around an 86% national unemployment rate of adult autistic people in the United States. This is no surprise. This is widely published information that almost anyone, if they are living and existing in the United States, would know that. Another widely known fact about autistic adults is that most autistic adults require autism supports and financial services during their adult autistic life. And why is that? Because at around the age of 18, and certainly about by the age of 21, children with autism fall off the cliff. In other words, they no longer have these autism supports and services that most of them have received as a child. Now, I'm mostly talking about younger adults because in my day and age and the era I grew up, we didn't have an IDEA or IEPs or early autism diagnoses or interventions or ABA or any of that. We were just the lost generation who was ignored by, like, all the officials in the states in the United States and everyone in society. But now, let's just see what's going on with where the primary place is autistic adults living in the United States would need to go to get adult autism supports and financial services. We would go to the Social Security Administration. And this is where my video is going to upset some people, because I'm going to tell it like it is. So let's talk about the Social Security Administration under the Biden era, and before that, through a string of leftist Democratic presidents and administrations. First of all, it is beyond obvious that when an autistic child turns age 18, particularly in this era when I turned 18, which was around 1974, there were parents who were not going to do a thing to help their adult autistic child access Social Security benefits for being autistic and having this lifelong difference and disability. And so Social Security Administration historically has not done one single thing to provide a representative, a guardian ad litem, or any other type of communication assistance to allow adult autistic people turning age 18 to make a claim for necessary and vital adult autism supports and services with Social Security Administration upon turning age 18. And neither did they have any kind of autism transition services or planning back when I turned 18, so I have never had that. And so you go on into the adult world, and every time you try to find a job, you are rejected in the interview. And even if you get the job, you can't hold the job, you are fired. And this is job after job, but an adult autistic person can, in fact, accumulate 40 Social Security quarters by being hired and fired and 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 hired and fired their whole adult life from jobs, because they can't work these jobs. Why can't they work these jobs? Because it's a neurotypical designed world. And when you go to the Social Security Administration, like my late mother finally realized that there was a problem. And this is the complaint she had before she died. I paid taxes to Social Security, and your father paid taxes to Social Security, and they're not helping you. And yes, that was absolutely a valid and legitimate complaint. And so now, let's talk about Social Security Administration has created this SSA's listing of impairments for adult autism, number 12.10 in Social Security's Blue Book. Let's talk about this. Because first of all, Social Security is arbitrarily and capriciously and irrationally separating the listing of impairments for childhood autism from the listing of impairments for adult autism, when it's one and the same thing and the diagnosis is retrospective. But it's trickery is why they do this. Why do they do this? Well, let's look at the listing of impairments for adult autism. And here they are, provided by this blog here, canondisability.com. Here, disability benefits for autism spectrum disorder for adults. And so this doesn't even track the diagnostic criteria. It adds more things to it by saying you have to satisfy all of these. So they want medical records here of certain things, and they want extreme limitations in certain things. And then says, in order to meet listing 12.10, you must have all of the elements in the listing. Additionally, your doctor must confirm you have the condition and that it will last for more than 12 months. Notice something about this adult autism listing. This is where the trickery of the Social Security Administration comes in. It does not mandatorily require that the Social Security Administration make a fact finding that your autism began on or before the age of 3, that the onset of your disability for purposes of accessing SSI or SSDI is not mandatory required to be written into a lower level state analysis or into an administrative law judge decision at the onset of your autism disability is on or before the age of 3. And this trickery put forth by the leftist Biden era and previous Democratic administrations has allowed the Social Security Administration to make all sorts of arbitrary, capricious, irrational, wacky, nutty findings. The onset of your autism disability was when you were 38. It was when you were 49. It was when you were 53. It was on the date that you applied for the claim. That's sheer nonsense. That is a lie. It's a fabrication of evidence, and it doesn't follow the diagnostic criteria requirements for an autism spectrum disorder. It also intentionally ignores the retrospective effects of an autism spectrum disorder diagnosis. So, that right there is the first place that the leftist Biden-era Social Security Administration was screwing autistic adults out of money they should have been getting for autism supports and financial services, and it is what it is. It's right on the face of their own publications. Next, the Social Security Administration also, when they're counting quarters for accessing SSDI, they have your retrospective autism diagnosis in hand. Because they're twisting and trickery to cheat autistic adults out of money for the autism supports and financial services they require because of the 86% national unemployment rate of autistic adults, they also put the autistic adult in the neurotypical standard category of having to show you have 40 quarters like in the last 10 years. Because they don't mandatory have it written into their autism listing of impairments, have one listing of impairments for autism that applies to both children and adults, but instead separate it, and then do not include into the adult autism listing of impairments the mandatory finding that autism begins on or before the age of 3, that they have to write the onset of the disability is on or before the age of 3. They are cheating autistic adults by refusing to apply the standards for an adult who had the onset of the disability on or before the age of 18 or 22. And then on or before other ages like 33, etc. In other words, you would only have to count 6 quarters, not 40 in the last 10 years. So that's another way the leftist Biden-era Social Security Administration has been cheating by trickery adult autistic people in the United States out of the vital autism support financial services they require as autistic adults. Next, Social Security Administration has published retirement ages. And they've got these retirement ages, which they started increasing to be an older age before you can claim Social Security retirement benefits. And then they had some sort of a phase-in. So, ordinarily, at my age group, when I turned age 62, I could have claimed Social Security retirement benefits early. And then I wouldn't receive my full amount, but I would get some. And then they have this whole graduated thing where, say, if you don't claim until 70, you would get the full amount. And so this is blatant autism apartheid discrimination on its face of the Social Security Act. Why? Because here's the other way they have screwed autistic adults in the United States. Social Security Administration doesn't care and fabricates what the length of life expectancy is for people living in the United States. And they don't individualize assessment it. So, in other words, it's averaged across all populations. But there's different neurodivergent populations living in the United States. And some of them are ancestral and genetic. And for example, if you query in the average life expectancy of autistic people, which you would expect anyone working at the Social Security Administration could do, especially the Social Security Commissioner, you would find out that people on the autism spectrum have a lower life expectancy than neurotypical people. According to research by the National Library of Medicine, the average autism life expectancy in 2018 fell as low as 39 years old. And that shorter life expectancy was often met with plenty of other health problems. This is put out by Autism Parenting Magazine, Autism Life Expectancy, and What You Need to Know. Okay, so now we know by these facts that the Social Security Administration, who everyone who is living today in the United States knows is having a budget problem. They expect to run out of money by, I think, something like 2033 or 2036. And so how have they been patching Band-Aids on this to try to keep the Social Security going? Well, they've been looting the autistic population in the United States. They're looting us out of our money. The whole population of autistic people, pretty much, because the average life expectancy is 9 years old. But let's talk about simple math for a minute. If the average life expectancy of autistic people in the United States is 39 years old, and the first age at which you can claim your retirement benefits is 62, and then it's becoming later for people born in later years because they're phasing it up, they're ratcheting it up to try to make it have to be old when you collect your Social Security retirement benefits. Simple math will tell you that Social Security Administration, fully knowing that their average autism life expectancy is 39 years old, and knowing that autistic people cannot claim their Social Security retirement benefits till 62 years old or later, they know they're cheating the autistic population out of their Social Security retirement benefits. That's our money. That's money we worked for. Because they know autistic people, as an average actuarial basis, will never live long enough to claim their retirement benefits and get their money back. They know this. So they're looting this population's money, and this is one pillar of the building of the autism apartheid existing in the United States, and it's every bit as much of an apartheid as any apartheids have been anywhere else in the world. And it's true. And I'll do more videos on this because we're going to prove there's an autism apartheid on autistic people in the United States. But who are they looting this money for? Where is all this money going? Autistic people, however much they can work, they're being forced to try to work, and they're hired and they're fired 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 from jobs with extreme trauma being inflicted on them and just terror of having to go into these neurotypical workplaces with an 86% national unemployment rate, but the revolving door being hired and fired and hired and fired and hired and fired and hired and fired because Social Security Administration ALJs, I have it in writing that they have no autism educational training whatsoever. And neither do the state components that work up the disability at the lower levels. So they don't have the vocabulary. We talk about this as late diagnosed autistic people, that when you get your autism diagnosis, it gives you a vocabulary to describe your life. You knew you were different from childhood. You knew you didn't fit in. In many cases, we're told we're broken and bad. It gives us a vocabulary to understand and describe why this is happening to us by neurotypicals. And likewise, the autism diagnosis should be giving these disability officials of the Social Security Administration the same vocabulary so they're on the same page. So, for example, if you're an adult autistic and you tell a Social Security ALJ, I can't work, I have extreme sensory overload to smells, hundreds of smells and odors, and I can't go into a neurotypical work site because if somebody walks in with garlic on their breath or eat garlic at their little cubicle at lunch, I'll have an instant involuntary autistic meltdown, have to run out of the building, at which point you can't maintain work in the national economy that way. If you tell that ALJ the term autistic meltdown, they don't know what you're talking about. They're scratching their heads. They're going, they don't know. So you've got this situation where autistic adults can accumulate 40 quarters of work to be eligible for retirement benefits in the United States. But the way they're accumulating it is going out to hundreds of jobs and being hired and fired and hired and fired, hired and fired, hired and fired. And that accumulates the 40 quarters. So now we have to ask another question. Who are they looting all this money for? Where is all this money going? Well, let's talk about the Biden era initiated so-called falsely captioned Social Security Fairness Act. Who's it fair to? People who have other pensions coming and they're greedy and they want another one put on top of it because they're not getting all the pensions they think they should get because they want to live a nice lifestyle in retirement. Well, where's the money come from? It's being looted from autistic people whose average life expectancy is age 39, who are passing away as an average by age 39. But they've been forced by these listening impairments for adult autism being wacky and trickery to screw them over by not requiring the ALJs to make the fact finding that the onset of the disability is on or before the age of 3. They're looting that money, and then they're giving it in the so-called Social Security Fairness Act to all these people who are neurotypical, who already have a pension or two, and yeah, that's fair, because they should get what they work for, they should get that. Well, but they're the majority who are also screwing autistic people at an 86% national unemployment rate out of jobs. And then you have the illegal migrant invasion under Biden era. You have an 86% national unemployment rate. Well, you could have given jobs, made them available and accessible to autistic adults who would have been happy to work and not be paid 1 cent on the dollar because they have a developmental disability. You could have paid them a real wage. And so this illegal invasion that, thanks to Donald Trump, is now being eradicated and thrown out of this country, they were taking all the jobs. And so this is just a system of oppression of the autistic population, adult autistic population in the United States. So who's the Social Security Fairness Act fair to? Not autistic adults. If you really wanted truth in labeling of legislative acts, and you wanted to call something a Social Security Fairness Act, you would legislate a solution to this crisis affecting the adult autistic population in the United States. You wouldn't loot autistic adults to call it fairness by looting them and paying the money to people who already, neurotypical people who already have a pension or two. You would call it a Social Security Fairness Act because you would be reconfiguring Social Security to make sure autistic adults were receiving and accessing their adult autism supports and financial services that they need because of the 86% national U.S. unemployment rate for autistic adults. But let's think about this another way. Because President Trump and Elon Musk, they have a different perspective. And they come from the background of business. And so anyone would know with venture capital and startup businesses, you can have brilliant autistic adults in tech. You want to incubate their talents and their abilities. So you don't mind paying money to incubate their talents and abilities to bring them to full bloom to benefit the U.S. economy. Well, they're not doing that with autistic adults. They're cutting us off right at the age of 18. And then they're subjecting us to a massive adult autism population poverty that is just massive, and forcing us to live our lives in this kind of poverty. And then they're tweaking their Social Security to make sure you can't access the adult autism supports and financial services you need for the reasons I have explained. And they're looting autistic adults out of their retirement money because the retirement age for autistic adults with an average life expectancy of 39 years old should sure as heck be a lot younger than 39 to claim your Social Security retirement benefits. Either that or they should do something to ensure that autistic adults can make their life expectancy longer than age 39. So now, let's look at part of this looting of the autistic population by the Biden and Democrat leftist era of Social Security Administration. President Trump explains it better than I ever could.
Over 100, there aren't a lot of people that make it. Hopefully most of the people in this room will make it, but historically, you don't have thousands and thousands of people. But listen to this, 3.6 million people are on Social Security rolls from the age of 110 years old to 119. Do you think there are really that many? Those people are seriously old. But it gets worse. 3.47 million people are on Social Security from the age of 120 years old to 129 years old. 3.9 million people are on the age of Social Security from 130 years old to 139 years old. Now, the all-time record, I heard, is a woman who was 127 years old. That's the record. A woman from a certain country where they have actually people that live pretty long, actually. And she was 127 years old. That's pretty old, but we're topping her by millions of people. 3.5 million people from the age 140 to 149 years old. 1.3 million people are on Social Security from the age 150 to 159. And over 130,000 people are on Social Security over the age of 160 years old, okay? Including 1,039 people, think of it, over 1,000 people between the ages of 220 to 229. And one person between the age of 240 years old to 249. And the record topper, there is one person on Social Security who's 360 years old, which is approximately 110 years older than our country.
Okay, and that was a clip from Forbes breaking news this morning entitled, "But It Gets Worse. Trump reads off shock Social Security payments." And that is on YouTube right here. So there you have it. From the president's own mouth. The looting is clear. There are gobs and gobs of somebody, of people getting money from Social Security who should not be. In addition, they just passed this so-called falsely labeled Social Security Fairness Act in order to allow people who already have one or more pensions to double, triple dip and get extra money now by getting more Social Security money. Those are retirees. At the same time, the average age of mortality of autistic people, autistic population, this is a human variation group of people. It's an entire population group. The autistic people. There's a whole community of autistic people in the United States. The average age of mortality of this population is 39 years old. Right on its face of the Social Security Act, you cannot claim retirement benefits until on or after the age of 62. It doesn't take more than about a 6th grade mathematics student to figure out they're looting the money to take it away from the autistic population. Autistic people keep being made to work or try to work because, and I'll do another video on this, the way the Social Security Administration evaluates and assesses adult autistic disability claims to give the financial supports and services that adult autistic people need, it's very deficient and flawed. It is rigged to force autistic people to just keep going into these workplaces that are neurotypical dominated, to be abused, to be fired over and over again, not because they can't do the job, but because neurotypical people don't like our differences. They're too inconvenient. It gives them the heebie-jeebies. Why? Because they don't understand autistic people. They don't want to understand them. And the whole economy in the United States, or at least whole segments of it, are run to benefit predominantly neurotypical people. And so then when the autistic person, by being hired and fired and hired and fired and hired and fired in a revolving door, manages to accumulate 40 quarters of work, just barely, and qualify for retirement benefits, well, I'm an example. I get a little under $200 a month to live on as my only income and for the rest of my life. Who can live on $199 a month in the United States? Get real. Social Security Administration needs to get real. And so what you have is, oh, it's fair to give double, triple dippers more money, more Social Security money. It's okay for people who don't exist. They're 350, 60 years old. They're taking money out of Social Security, but you're not doing anything to give the financial supports and services that autistic people need to them, either during their lifetime or at retirement. Okay, I exceeded the average rate of mortality, but it doesn't make my situation any better, because who can live on a little under $200 a month? Nobody. It's an autism apartheid. Our country should be ashamed. And we are the people that have the specialist brains who can invent computers, invent AI, make beautiful artwork, make some of the most complex music there ever has been. We are scientists. We have all sorts of outstanding skills. But we are being looted. Our population is being looted on its face. And then you have these Social Security ALJs and these Florida bar members in their offices. I can't say about other bar members around the country, but let's just say it how it is. They don't know shit about what autism is. If they did, they wouldn't be abusing autistic adults, looking for ways to dismiss their claims for the adult financial supports and services they need. And they would understand there's an 86% national unemployment rate. And they wouldn't be treating somebody who is 68 years old, almost 69, who is autistic, like they're 20 years old and a spring chicken and a bionic woman and can just jump up and down and do any generalist job there is in the economy. Get real. Get real. Yes, this is a complaint that needs to be made. It needs to be made by more and more autistic people in the United States because it's devastating to the autistic population, and I could tell you that firsthand from my lived autistic experience. It's something that needs to be changed. Yes, this is a video calling them out, but the reason I'm calling them out is it's abusive and discrimination of this population of autistic people that happens to include me. And it's through no fault of our own. They just want us to not be autistic and to be masked, to be a neurotypical and fit in, and then everything will go fine for us. Well, you know what? That's just not okay. It's just not okay. And we are autistic. That is our identity. That is who and what we are. And you can't have an autism apartheid in this country. Or if you do, maybe the rest of the world should call you out on it, like South Africa. This is real. This exists. This is what's happening in the United States. And hopefully, Donald Trump will clean this up and will restore some sense to Social Security, including making sure sufficient adult autism supports and services are available to incubate the specialized talents and traits of autistic people so that we are recognized for our contributions to the economy, not vilified and robbed of the financial supports and services we need. You incubate a startup business, venture capital incubates AI and tech companies. It's long past time to incubate the autistic people who bring all of the advancements of humanity to our country. If you like my video, please hit the subscribe button and ring the bell, and you'll be notified of my future videos. And thank you for watching.